G'day, Rowan Kernebone from the Injured Workers Support Network with another Your Questions Answered podcast. Today we're going to be talking about termination and what it means. Unfortunately, it's part of life for being an injured worker is the threat or the act of being terminated from your work. And your work can do that in a few ways. So we'll be discussing some of the ways, some of the differences between the acts that we have here in New South Wales and in particular Comcare. In other states, if you're listening in from other states, the laws do change and are different, so I'll have to refer you to your legislation and hopefully your union, if you're involved in the union, to get those questions answered there. So we've got the Workers' Compensation Act in New South Wales, which is most people who will be listening to this will be under. Termination can happen if you're an injured worker, but it can't happen within the first 6 months. So that's Section 8 of the Workers' Compensation Act of 1997. How it happens is unfortunately very simple for the employer, and it shouldn't be. It's wrong. It's completely and utterly wrong. But an injured worker is protected for 6 months and 6 months only. Within those 6 months, the employer has to try to provide suitable duties. And in saying that, there's nothing in the Act to compel the employer to do suitable duties, to have suitable duties. Just to show an intent, or at least some type of research into what those suitable duties could be. So if they can't provide suitable duties, and we have some examples of very large departments where they just refuse to provide suitable duties, and large companies as well. If they don't provide suitable duties, after 6 months they can say there are no longer any suitable duties for you, we will have to terminate. So that's what I call a Baird trap. Mike Baird has put this into the legislation to, I don't know actually why, pander to the big business. I'm not too sure. Your conspiracy theories are more than welcome to answer that question. But that's the reality. 6 months is protection for the the injured worker, and after that the employer just has to say we can no longer provide suitable duties, see you later. So that's the New South Wales Act. Awards and enterprise agreements might change that, and agreements between unions and workplaces might change that, and certainly if you are in a union, I'll give them a call, because termination is not just about workers' compensation, it's industrial law as well. Industrial law says that you can't terminate an employer without fair reason for doing so. So there are ways that you can be terminated even within those 6 months if they're applying industrial law rather than workers' compensation law. One of the main ways this happens is through a redundancy. So there's a restructure at work. Within that restructure, your position is made redundant, and therefore you are terminated from that. Now, there are a few things there. If it's just your position, say you're working as a sales clerk in Coles, the Coles does a restructure, and you're the only sales clerk to get fired from that, that's not actually a proper redundancy. That's targeting you as an injured worker. If it's the only position that's there that does that job, that's a bit different. But these are questions for the industrial law courts, the Fair Work Australia, or if you're a public servant or other people, the New South Wales Industrial Commission. So that it has to be answered there. But if it is a redundancy, if it's a true redundancy and it affects other people, so not just you, maybe 2 or 3 other people, then that's just a normal termination of employment. It's not workers' compensation at all. In that situation, in fact in any terminated situation, you will still continue to be on workers' compensation. That won't end. Other things might come into play, a work capacity assessment and work capacity decision might be done, but in terms of your workers' compensation, that continues. The main change is that instead of being paid by your employer, you're paid directly by the insurer. In all cases, you are awarded what you're right. So if you have long service leave, sick leave, if you're allowed to accumulate it, and in the case of a redundancy, your redundancy pay, you still should get that. But that's the reality, unfortunately. Baird's trap, after 6 months, if the employer can say we have no suitable duties and they don't really need to prove it and there's no real court to prove it in, you can get terminated. Comcare, it's a bit different. Comcare, you can be terminated only if your plan changes to say you can't go back to that employer. So not same job, same employer, or different job, different employer. In that way you can be terminated. Normal industrial law redundancies apply, but you have that protection in Comcare, not in New South Wales legislation. So that's termination. I'm sorry, that's unfortunately one of the things that we need to change because it's completely and utterly unfair, but that's termination.